you doing? Okay, everybody well? Hey, Joe, how are you? Okay?
Yeah.
We care.
All right, whenever you guys are ready.
No opening statement. Hello, everyone. And we'll take your questions.
Artūras, I was hoping you could talk us through kind of the timeline for Lonzo. What happened? What led to the decision for surgery? And also, the big question is why so late? Why wasn't maybe that addressed earlier in the summer?
Well, I think, first of all, we gave every opportunity to rehab and get back on a court without doing the surgery. So that was our thought process, and we did, obviously, with the thought in mind, what's best for the player. We're at crossroads now that we need to do something else, and that's why we opted in to do the procedure. We worked very closely with Lonzo and his representation and looked at every option possible, and we got to this conclusion. In terms of timeline, we don't know what's going to be, as we reported, 4-6 weeks, we're going to reevaluate him and see where he's at.
You following up on that? Or no?
Okay. So, Artūras, obviously with the Lonzo thing and so much talk about continuity and bringing everything back, when you looked and saw what happened with the rest of the East, does that, your plan is your plan, you really can't change it, but does that make you rethink it that there's some continuity with some other teams in the East, but also the teams kind of in our area code also improved? Does that kind of change your idea of what the plan was and maybe rethinking that plan?
It doesn't change it just because I don't think we saw our group and with any kind of consistency. We had 29 different starting lineups last year. We didn't have Lonzo since January, so it's been 3 games. We played without him, so I think we need to see, we need time to see this group play together longer to have any kind of conclusion, because we liked what we saw in the first 20 games. But I think this group needs a lot more time, and the things that we're going to focus on, because it's a lot of talent at this team, the things that we're going to focus on is chemistry and team cohesion and relationships. Because we all understand that, the talent wins games and relationships win championships. So we're trying to move towards, with winning in mind, and everything that we do in our building is thinking about, winning. So.
Building on that, Billy, with Lonzo out at least at the start of the season, how do you approach the point guard position? Are you planning on Ayo kind of continuing in the role he was in last year, and just kind of what's the expectation for the start of the season in that position?
Yeah, I've always said this. I think anytime you lose a good player, it's always challenging, and Lonzo is obviously a terrific player. The injuries are part of it. I think because of last year, we've had a lot of different guys at that spot. Ayo played there quite a bit. So did Kobe. So did Alex Caruso. Adding Goran right now gives us obviously a really good veteran there. I think we'll have to see how these guys gel and mesh once training camp starts and we start practicing. But I think we have enough back there that we can get the job done from that standpoint. And I feel like with Ayo being a year older, that certainly helps us. Kobe's a year older. Alex, going into training camps healthy. Goran's been, a terrific player in this league for a long period of time. So there's enough balance back there, I think, that we can figure that out.
Artūras, following up on that, how did Lonzo's kind of uncertain timeline influence the way you operated in free agency and such this summer? Were you counting on him being back? Would you maybe like to do something more on that point guard position, or how do you feel just about yourself at that position right now?
Well, I think the approach was basically adding more talent, adding more depth. We did retain 12 players from last year, added, Andre Drummond, and added Goran, and then drafted Dalen. So I think I think we focus more on the depth and giving enough ammunition for Billy to operate and give him enough guards and wings to be functional.
I was hoping both of you guys could speak about the free agency additions. Artūras, you talking about what attracted you to signing Andre and Goran, and Billy, you talking about maybe usage or how you see employing them?
Well, behind, adding Andre Drummond was basically adding size, adding a lead rebounder. We've seen how he can switch 1 through 5, and just he can definitely help us, with Vooch in front. So with Goran was more in terms of adding experience, the guy that is still hungry and chasing winning, leadership. So that was behind adding Goran, and I was happy that we were able to get those two guys.
Yeah, and I think from, front court center position, Vooch is obviously a guy that stretches the floor and does a lot of different things, both inside and out. And I think, as AK alluded to, Andre is a guy that really is an elite rebounder, has been an elite rebounder for a long period of time. I think he gives us more rim protection back there. He gives us more size. I think he can certainly make a difference, for us on both ends of the floor. Because I think the one thing with Andre that's a little bit underrated is he has been a pretty good facilitator. He's obviously been an elite roller and screener, but he also can facilitate some. And I think that that's something that maybe we can help, utilize, from him. I've always been an admirer of Goran. No previous relationship. Artūras has a relationship with him and had talked to me about him. I had a chance to go over to Slovenia and spend some time with him. And just an incredible guy. And as Artūras said, I think a guy that's hungry to win, but also a guy that I think will do whatever he needs to do out there to impact the group. Whether it's through leadership or the way he plays, playing on the ball, off the ball. I think throughout his career, he has just always, prided himself on winning and competing. And I think as a veteran guy who's, deep into his career, I think that kind of player in the locker room can help the entire group.
Was that before or after your
That was before. He was like in between. He had some time off there, so he was back in Slovenia.
Billy, I remember I talked to you a couple years ago about pressure, and you brought up the story about when you were at Florida, like in your second or third year, and had young kids, and that was coaching pressure. But as far as NBA coaching pressure, this is year 3. You guys are kind of bringing the same crew back. The expectations have raised since last year. Do you feel it? Do you feel okay, we made the playoffs, we were bouncing that first round, there has to be more, I have to get more out of these guys, there has to be put more on me? I mean, do you start to kind of swim in that pool?
Yeah, I think I'm always in that pool regardless, whether it was my first year or last year, is, how do you continue to make the group better? I think as you look back on it, if you look at the season in its totality, we made a jump from the first year to the second year. But if you really start to, put a magnifying glass up to after the All-Star break, against some of the better teams, we were really, really dominated, and how do we get better in those areas against those elite teams? I think if you look at the top 4 teams in the East and the top 4 teams in the West, all 4 of those teams advanced to the second round. So the goal is to try to take, another step as a group. And, for me, I think that people will look at the fact, and there is a truth to this. Our club last year had the most number of missed games, certainly by anybody in the East. I don't know about the West. I don't think that had anything to do, in my opinion, after the All-Star break, the way we played. We've got to be able to be better from that standpoint. But if you look at the whole season in terms of the where we were the year before, not making the playoffs, and then the number of wins where we were, but how do we actually try to take another step and get better? And I think that's what you want to be able to do. So, I think as a coach, you're always in that mode constantly of how to help the group get better, how do we raise our level of play, and how do we take another step? That's the goal.
Do you have something in mind as far as a plan from what you saw in that second half that you didn't like that can be changed with this group, whether it's approach or whether it's scheme or whether it's...
Yeah, I think I mentioned to you guys coming out of the the exit interview before we kind of all left for the summer, that I was going to maybe really try to look into just our team. And it's interesting because I think we had the 3rd best record in the league last year in close games. But when you go against the best teams, and there wasn't a lot of games, to be honest with you, that we were close on against those teams. But the games we 1-8. So we've got to find out and understand there's going to be certain things that are going to be sustainable, you know, that we're going to have to do, that are going to be necessary to take another jump. And I thought, and I mentioned this maybe many times during the year, I thought we had some times the point guard position when Lonzo was there. I thought our pace of play, I thought our ball movement, I thought the way we were playing was really good. I thought as the season went on, we got a little bit maybe more one-dimensional. I think we became a little bit more predictable. I think there was a lot on Zach and DeMar's plate, and Zach certainly probably wasn't where he was at health-wise like he's been for most of his career, and he dealt with a lot of stuff last year, and DeMar had an incredible year and carried us another way, but that's only going to get us so far. We have to do other things to take another step, and that's where I think our focus has got to be going forward.
Artūras, regarding Lonzo's surgery, is there anything that you know about it? Like, are they going in there with a problem in mind that they're trying to fix, or are they going in there to try to figure out what's wrong, or what do you know about it?
No, I think doctors, what we announced, basically we're going to have surgery, and hopefully that's going to resolve, the problem, and we'll see if we can get him on a basketball court, and then, next 4-6 weeks we're going to see how that worked.
Is there anything you know about it? Like you can describe in layman's terms what they're
No,
trying to fix?
I'm not a doctor, so I'm just going to wait and see and what doctors will tell me.
Billy, Artūras just talked about needing time to see this team play together. When looking at Pat specifically, what are your expectations for him and Patrick Williams?
Pat, yes.
What do you need to see from him this year, and what kind of conversations have you had with him about what you need to see from him this year?
Well, I think everybody knows him being more aggressive is where it starts. But, I really think for him, one, coming into the league as young as he was, coming into a COVID year with a shortened training camp, his rookie year was a little bit different. He got an enormous amount of playing time and starts his rookie year. And then I think 9 games into the year, he missed 5 months. To me, there's been part of his development that's been missed, certainly going into to last year. And this has probably been the first normal off season he's had. And I think developing and establishing a routine, and he's had a very good summer. But we need him to take another step, as a player, and I think he can do that. I think the one thing that's great about Patrick is, besides being a good team guy, the guys believe in him and the guys can see it in him. But I do think that the last 2 years there probably have been some challenges for Patrick, just the way things have fallen, whether it been COVID or him breaking his wrist. And now I think he's got to try to take another step as a player, to help us. And he's got a couple of years under his belt, although last year was cut short for him. I still think that this was, a very, very good summer for his progress going into the season.
I just want to ask you guys about Zach, who also had knee surgery over the offseason. Is he good to go? Anything lingering that you may have to manage with him?
Yeah, it's good to go.
Aston. With Lonzo out, Billy, what do you see this team's identity being for whatever period of time he's out? Because we know when him and Alex were in the backcourt last year, you got out in transition. So with that in mind, and how does the point guard decision of who starts affect how you want to play as well, identity-wise?
Yeah, I would, going back and looking at last year, there was no question that as we were dealing with the injuries, myself as a coach was adjusting and changing and doing things. I thought there was a lot on Ayo's plate last year, and he did a terrific job not knowing what to expect, and certainly him going into the season and with Alex and Kobe and Lonzo being there, we had no idea what Ayo's role was going to even be. And then it went from a guy that maybe would go back and forth to the G League to a guy that really, I think, stepped up and played in exceptionally well for us, right? So how can we establish an identity, through, injury, so to speak, and I think that was kind of the thing that maybe threw us a little bit of a curveball last year was, one, here's this entire new group coming together for the first time. We kind of start out how we're trying to play, and guys were doing a really good job and we were playing well. And then as guys started to get hurt, it started to impact. And I thought I don't know if it was a right decision or wrong decision, but the reality was I felt like we needed to adjust in certain situations just based on what our team was at certain times during the course of the year to put our guys in the best position to win. Now, with that being said, we have to be able to establish something on both ends of the floor, where there's a level of consistency now that these guys have a body of work where they've played together, the core. Andre and Goran have not played with these guys, but at least there is some sample size, although it not be great, that we've played together. We now know the things that we're not going to be able to sustain that are going to help us, and we're going to have to make some changes and do some things that would help us and allow us to take another step. That's where I think the identity piece has got to come in for us.
Is it fair to say point guard's wide open competition entering training camp, or do you have a leader?
Yeah, I mean, I think, certainly Goran, when you look at him and his experience, right, and what he's done throughout his career, he's certainly by far the most seasoned, most experienced point guard, on our team. But at the same point, too, at 36 years old, and I think he'd be the first one to admit, he's not a guy that's going to play 36 minutes a game. So, whether you start him or bring him off the bench, you want sometimes shortening the game and having him come off the bench puts him in a situation where you're able to play him, a lot more, maybe coming down the stretch. Io, I think, did a terrific job for us last year. He played there. I said this, Kobe, I think, for his year last year with the shoulder and COVID combined, and then all the injuries. One minute was at the point, then he's come off the bench, then he was starting at the two guards. But there was a lot of things thrown at him last year too, just based on what happened to our team. So I don't want to, and Alex played there some. I don't want to sit there and say it's like wide open, but we need to compete and we need to see how. I'm more concerned about how groups function and play together more so than just one position. And I do think at the point guard position, there is experience that we've got with Goran. There's experience there with Alex. I think there's now experience with Io. Kobe's played back there. So I think there's enough right now. Who starts, how it goes, and the starting job, I'm not really that wrapped up in that right now as much as can we establish who we want to be as a team going forward.
Artūras, is there a timeline on Lonzo's recovery, and what's your confidence level that once he gets through this, he'll be able to stay healthy going forward?
The timeline that we announced were, 4-6 weeks, and we're going to reevaluate him. So we still don't. I do not know those answers. It depends what the procedure is going to do to make him feel better. So.
And what's your confidence level that is health going forward?
I'm always a positive guy, so I'm confidence level that we're going to see him on the floor when. It's just going to depend on how he feels during recovery.
Billy, when you're talking about Pat taking another step in his development, what are tangible things that you would consider would be him taking another step in that?
Well, I mean, he's got I think one of the hardest things to do as a young player, and especially for Patrick, because Patrick is more of a pass-first player. It's just instinctively who he is, but he also has a lot of different abilities. And I think the encouragement by our guys for him to be more aggressive is the place where it needs to start. I think the other thing for Patrick is I think when you see maybe, going into the playoffs last year, I think it was Minnesota, maybe it was the last game of the year, DeMar, Vooch, Zach didn't play, and he was kind of really thrust to, he's capable. And I think the hardest thing to do as a young player when you're playing with a guy like Vooch and Zach and DeMar and experienced players is when do I shoot, when do I pass, when do I drive, how do I be aggressive, when can I be aggressive? And I think now he's starting to understand where his spots are. And then in his spots, he has got to be in a position where he's attacking and being aggressive. That may be running the floor, getting on the offensive glass, coming off screening action, catching the ball in the pocket, is just to have a mentality of to try to create an advantage to the next play. And I think he can do that. He has shown signs to do that, but we've got to continually push him in that situation. And, in fairness to him last year, when you miss 5 months and you come back the last 12 games of the year, there is a period that he's got to adapt to just getting back on the floor. And that's where I was talking a little bit earlier that I thought that really hurt his development because he missed an enormous amount of time, and then you're bringing him back, and then you're trying to get him back in the flow of things. And I actually thought, considering of what he had to deal with last year, he played really, really well the last, 12, 15 games of the year, and I thought he played well in the playoffs. So I think that was a positive step, and hopefully he can take another one this year.
Let's get a couple more, guys.
Couple more. Well, I actually have one for each of them. Is that okay? I'm going to start with Artūras because his answers are usually shorter. What are your
I
personal?
can make them shorter.
Yeah. What are your personal expectations for this team?
Well, we've talked to Billy, and obviously the last year result. We were not surprised that we made a playoffs. A lot of people were surprised, nor we should be surprised to make the playoffs this year. But what we want to see is obviously improvement. Once you get to the playoffs and you have healthy bodies, I think a lot of things can happen. So I think we have to do better than last year. And, when you get to the playoffs, as always, things happen. Certain teams missing, one or two key players, and you can, get by around. So those are the expectations.
And then, Billy, for you, you always said last season with that fourth best 3-point percentage, but 30th in attempts, that you weren't just going to take threes just to take threes, but you did want to get that number up. Do you feel you guys added enough shooting? Because that was a big offseason priority. And then, there's a dalliance with Gallinari, leads to Dragic, Kobe White's still around. How do you feel about your shooting component entering this season?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with our team. I think, like Artūras said, there maybe hasn't been enough time with these guys on the floor. Certainly, Lonzo's situation doesn't help that. I think if you look at the fact that Patrick's numbers have been pretty good from the 3-point line. Zach's been an elite 3-point shooter. The same thing could be said for Kobe. I think we got good shooting from Javonte, especially from the corner spots. Am I going to sit there and say we're this elite 3-point shooting team? But I think we're more than capable, to do that. And, I think for us, we've got to understand, and picking back what Artūras said, like, this year is going to be way harder than last year. Just because the East is better, and, we've got a lot more challenges in front of us. And I think I said that at the end last year in the exit interview. It is going to be a lot harder, and we're going to have to put more into it for us to take another step. And that's what Artūras, I think, was talking. For us, we got to put the work in, and we have got to really, really commit to understanding just how much more challenging and difficult this season will be compared to last.
Billy, you're a little bit thin at the power forward spot behind Patrick. Last year, when you brought Tristan and you kind of experimented with using two bigs with Vooch and Tristan, we've seen a lot of video of Andre Drummond on social media. It looks like he's slimmed down in good shape. Do you envision scenarios where you can play Vooch and Drummond together?
Well, I think one of the things we'll have to look at in training camp is different combinations, whether it's Vooch and Andre together. I can't sit here now and say that's going to be something we definitely want to do. I do think with Javonte and Derek, those guys have played the power forward spot. We've used Alex Caruso at the power forward spot as well. To your point, there's maybe an experimentation even in training camp, or even looking at Patrick playing small at the 5. So I think there's some versatility with the players that we have. It's hard for me to comment on Vooch and Andre playing together because I've never seen it, and I don't know how it would be. And I think with spacing in today's NBA, who's going to guard another team's power forward? Who is the power forward they're guarding? Is it someone that's coming off screens and running around like that? Those could be challenging covers. Certainly, if you're going against a team that's playing two bigs, something like that could make sense. But I do think there's versatility and flexibility across our front line that we can look at maybe some of those different options.
Speaking of Vooch, he obviously didn't have the season that you or he probably envisioned when you made the trade for him last year. Just kind of what gives you confidence that he'll be able to bounce back this year?
Well, one is I think Vooch had a very, very good summer. I do think there's always an adjustment period, and Vooch has always been a team-first guy. The one thing that was really important for our team last year was his availability. He played, last year. I do think that being in Orlando, where he was constantly the feature guy for a good portion of his career, and now playing with a totally different team, and at times different players coming in and out of the lineup, that was an adjustment for him, But I think having a year under his belt with a lot of these guys, although we didn't have our full complement of players, I think that he'll figure out where and how he can continue to get better and improve. But I've always had a lot of confidence in Vooch because he's a total team guy, tries to play the right way. There's some fundamental things about the way he views the game that I have a high level of respect for because it's all about, trying to make each other better, trying to move the ball. And as a big man, he's a really good facilitator. So I think he's had a good summer. I think he's worked really, really hard. And I would imagine after playing with this group of guys for a period of time, that will help him understand maybe, where his spots are and then how he can take another step as a player as well.
Billy, right here. What are you asking out of DeMar this season?
I think his leadership's really important, first and foremost. I think that's important. I think, him setting a tone along with the rest of the veterans, in training camp. What kind of team are we going to end up being, when adversity hits and things get difficult, because they always do for every team. And the one thing I admire about DeMar and respect about DeMar is he doesn't go into games with a predetermined mentality of what he's going to do. He reads the game and plays. So more so than anything else, I just need him to be who he is, on the court. He just play to who he is and who he's been and what's made him a great player throughout his career. I think that's what he'll always do. He figures out what the team needs, whether it's in a quarter, a half, a game, a practice, and I think when he figures those things out, he generally makes a pretty positive impact on the group.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Got
Yep,
Zach
thank you.
here. He's ready.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. See you guys soon.